I don't think Michael needs an introduction since this is week 3, but to use a
For
Halloween...
some of you, it's only week 2, but...
That's true. But to use a Halloween metaphor, we are treated these 3 weeks.
Ooh.
And no Nestle Crunch, but at least
Very nice.
A nice treat. And welcome back, Rabbi Michael Zedek.
Thank you, Michael. And thank you for this invitation, and thank you for the wonderful opportunity for us to learn together. I really do have in my head, at least, so much that I want to try for us to explore. We'll see how much we get, and I'm confident we won't get it all done. In fact, it does remind me of a story, most things do, of a rabbi who is despairing of all the interruptions keeping him from his work. And so he prays to the Eternal to be removed from all these interruptions. And his prayer is answered. No interruptions. And then he realizes the interruptions were his work. So, back to the interruptions. What are you going to remind me of?
Holy, holy, holy.
Holy, holy, holy. You got a good translation? I'll do is the Eternal of hosts. The whole earth is God's, and there's the problem. God's glory is the usual way. Would that be the translation that you run into? The Hebrew word is kavodo. God's kavod, whatever kavod is. And that's why I wanted to bring it up, because I would translate it, the fullness of the whole earth, molo kol haaretz, the fullness of the whole earth, is God's. Now, I may have mentioned, the word kavod comes from the Hebrew word kabed, which is liver. And why does the notion of honor, which is the base level meaning of kavod, come from the word for liver? Because the liver is the heaviest organ in the body, and then there's have heaviness. So the fullness of the whole earth is God's presence. In short, I once said, there is no place where God is not, and where God is, all is well. I don't remember saying it, but I really like it. So I'll take credit for it, and that's why I wanted holy, because it seems to me that if we use the categories that Rudolf Otto made unnecessary, of the mysterium tremendum, overwhelmed with transcendence, I'm overwhelmed with immanence. I mean, literally, I cannot take 6 paces. In fact, there's a Talmudic phrase, one may not walk more than 6 cubits, that's about 4 feet, without pausing to give praise to the source. Now, it would make it very hard to get through a walk, right? Wow. Oh boy. Thank you. But it's meant to be a recognition that the fullness of the whole earth, if we would just have the eyes to see, and as we took, if you take a look at Deuteronomy, to this day, God has not given you the eyes to see nor ears to understand, because it's our job to do that work. Okay, let's go. Oh, let's go to chapter 18, verse 1 of Genesis. I remember. Vayera is the title of this section in Hebrew, and that's because it's the first significant word. Titles are a relatively new invention, by the way, but what Judaism did was it took the first significant word and it gave that to the title of the section. And Genesis is simply called Genesis because Bereshit is the first word, which is usually translated in the beginning. It doesn't mean that. It means when the beginning. But Genesis, origins. So, the Eternal appeared to him being Abraham, by the oaks of Mamre as he was sitting at the entrance of the tent at about the hottest time of the day. Now, we're talking Beersheba, so it's desert. Hottest time of the day, noonish. He was in his tent. The tradition has it that he's 99 years old. Don't worry about numbers. Never trust the Hebrew Bible on numbers, I promise you. But the fascinating thing is with the next phrase. Looking up, the Hebrew is Vayisa Einav. He lifted up his eyes is what it literally means. Almost every time that phrase appears, you're going to learn, the text is trying to teach you something about meeting God. He lifted up his eyes means he was actually sort of seeing what was there, and now he's really seeing it, in effect. Following me? Okay? So he lifted up his eyes, and he saw 3 men standing by him. He saw them, and he ran to greet them from the opening of his tent, and he did obeisance to them. He bowed down to the earth, welcoming them, hospitality, etc., etc. Now, what's curious, God appears to him by the terebinths of Mamre, and if you want to put your tongue in my cheek, you say, "Oh, excuse me, I got to go run and meet those people." That's not the way we normally think of stuff. Fair? God appeared to him at the terebinths of Mamre at the hottest part of the day. Looking up, he saw 3 people, and he ran to greet them. How did God appear to Abraham at the terebinths of Mamre? When he saw, recognized, greeted, ran to embrace those 3 people. Because if you've been following my Mishigas, you know a little Yiddish? Everybody? Nobody? Oh boy. My craziness, my shtick. There's no such thing as secular humanism from the Bible's perspective. When I encounter you, I'm getting as close as I possibly can to meeting the one that is in and around and beyond all things, the one we traditionally associate with the word G-O-D. Okay? So, in effect, the real title of this section is God appeared to Abraham, how? By 3 men. Well, the text clearly says men.
But we see the presence of God in those 3 men, and we recognize that, and we joyfully go to greet them or meet them.
Okay. I like that very much, but I also, and I want to add, if you recall my notion that angels can be anyone who recognizes, embraces, and lives their message. Because that's what the word means in Greek, and that's what the word means from its Hebrew origins. But this text says specifically men. Now, there's no question that the text presents later that these are unusual individuals of some considerable importance in the divine scheme of things, or at least they move the narrative forward. And I doubt that.
Okay.
But I do want to turn to verse 9 now. At verse 18:9. Because after they've had some food that they pretended to eat if they were aliens, they then said to him, "Where is your..." By the way, I'm sorry. There's just so much here. If I just listen to the Hebrew of what we almost did. Vayomer Adonai, im na matzati chen beinecha al na ta'avor me'al avdecha yikach na me'al Adonai, the word Adonai occurs over and over and over again in this section. Some of you know that the word Adonai is a substitute word in Jewish tradition for the word that we often translate with too much male chauvinism as Lord. But it also means sirs. So the text even has that wonderful ambiguity. Is he talking to God or is he talking to these men? And the answer is yes. Okay? So there. All right, go ahead. You say tomato.
In here, and I'm wondering, what translation are you talking? Is there a Jewish, Arabic, Aramaic, or I'm sorry,
Aramaic.
Aramaic, sorry.
I am quite aromatic.
You do smell good, but and boy, I have a problem when it hit the Greeks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean every translation has its limitations because you got to make choices.
Okay, you seem to be.
Well, I'm using the book I'm using is the Jewish Publication Society translation. However, I'm not sticking to it. Because the Hebrew words have nuances, just as English words have nuances, and unfortunately you got to make a choice, and that always gets in the way. Okay, so.
Like a stick.
Well, maybe, but
S-T-I-C-K.
yeah, shtick.
Stick.
S-T-Y-C-H-A. Verse 9, they then said to him, "Where is your wife Sarah?" "There in the tent," he replied. One of them then said, "Rest assured that I will return to you at this time next year, and your wife Sarah shall have a son." Now, they are both of advanced years. Yes? And they've been trying to have a kid via Sarah. They've already had Hagar and Ishmael, right? Now, Sarah was listening at the edge of the tent. After all, there was not a lot to do in these behind him. Abraham and Sarah were old, well advanced in years. The way of women had ceased for Sarah, and so she's postmenopausal, is what the text says. So Sarah laughed inwardly, thinking, now that I am withered, will I have pleasure with my Lord so old? But the Eternal One, now this time it's God that they're saying it said to Abraham, why is Sarah laughing? Thinking, am I really going to bear a child when I have grown so old? Is any wonder too difficult for the Eternal? At this fixed time next year, I will return to you, and Sarah shall have a son. Now, why did Sarah laugh inwardly? What does the text say? Come on. Oh, no, the finish is, he can't perform. Isn't that what it says?
And God's trying to tell me I can have
Well,
a son?
no, wait. The text says the narrative says, Sarah says, he can't, you'll forgive me. Get it up. What does God report Sarah said?
He's too old.
She's too old. That's what Sarah said. That's what whatever it is that reports to Abraham, God is lying.
But isn't it always he said, she said?
No.
Your interpretation?
Yeah, there's no ambiguity here. She said in the Hebrew, Va'adonai, remember that word? This time it's my Lord, her husband, Zakein, is old. Then, Vayomer Adonai, the tetragrammaton, the fancy schmancy word of God, for God, says to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh, saying, I am so old that I should give birth to a child? There's a lie here, right? So what do you make of that? Jewish tradition specifically says, first of all, we're not Immanuel Kant, the absolute imperative, what do you call the imperative, the something imperative, the categorical imperative, thank you very much. You're not allowed to lie. Now I got to tell you, if my kids are being held hostage by anybody, I'm going to lie like crazy to get them out. And I don't care what Immanuel Kant thinks about that, and I suspect he isn't thinking a lot nowadays. However, for Jewish tradition, the notion that's derived from this in one other episode that we're going to look at in a few moments is that for the sake of peace, it is permissible to lie. But only for the sake of peace. Now, how do they derive that from this? I'll explain. If the reportage that the text attributes to God is, why did Sarah laugh, saying, you can't do the job? The likely response is, she says I'm the problem, huh? Well, Hagar's going to be with me tonight. God has got to get Abraham to be comforting of his wife Sarah in order for, because in every nativity scene in the Hebrew Bible, it's always male and female. We don't have a virgin birth narrative at all. Let me comfort you, my darling. You're still beautiful. You're following? Okay. Now, as long as we're there, let's go to, take a quick stop. Verse 24 in the same chapter. This is Abraham bargaining with the deity about the fate of Sodom and Gomorrah, which is, by the way, among the reasons why Jewish tradition judges Noah very harshly and Abraham more positively, even though Abraham is a terrible family man. I mean, my God, you would not want that man as your father. Noah is informed that he's going to survive. Not a word of protest. Can we work this out? What about me? He's the survivalist par excellence. Me and you, God, that's all I got, right? And he's way too normal. Abraham, however, is being informed that Sodom and Gomorrah? Oh, come on, buddy. You got it. Give him a break, huh? So the phrase that I want to, suppose there are 50 innocent in the city. Now, one of the principles of Jewish tradition's interpretation of text is there are no unnecessary words. It would have been enough to say, suppose there are 50. Why does it say the Hebrew is betoch ha'ir, in the midst of the city, literally? And our tradition says there were 50 righteous in Sodom, they just didn't live in the city. To use a word that hadn't been invented yet, they were in the suburbs. pretending that they were righteous, presumably, as opposed to being worried about what's going on the other side of truth, etc., etc., etc. Okay, now, I want you to go to Genesis chapter 22, and we're going to have big time problem here. After these things, God tested Abraham. Right? Anybody got a different one? After these things, God tested Abraham? Okay. Most people ignore the after these things. It's just a transition. What things? Anybody know what? We're going to have the almost killing of his son Isaac, whom we just found out we were going to have, and right, etc. And if for those of you who are aficionados of Soren Kierkegaard, the teleological suspension of the ethical and all this, the guy's attempted murder. And as an aside, after this episode, there's no record of God ever speaking to Abraham again, which I suggest, gee, this guy really messes up when I talk to him. Or, for that matter, of a conversation between Abraham and Isaac ever again. In the meantime, after what things? That's really important to the story.
Hagar and Ishmael.
Exactly. It's right after Sarah says to Abraham, kick Ishmael out. And rather than saying, in the case of Sodom and Gomorrah, oh, sure. God even says it's okay to do. But there's a category in Jewish tradition which I hope you'll adopt. It's called Lifnim Mishurat Hadin. That's not, I'm just showing off right now. It means doing more than is required. Because doing more than is required is what's required. So sure, it's okay to do, but should you do it? Should you throw? No, let's find another way to work this out, because it even gets worse in terms of this despicable family, dysfunctional family. I mean, every family in Genesis is dysfunctional. They're great models, but they aren't good examples. To wit, he sends them out, right? By the way, the phrase is important. Early the next morning, because that same phrase is going to be used in a moment. Early the next morning. What does he send Hagar and Ishmael out? With one loaf of bread and one cast of water into the desert. I would say this is SOB-ness. Having failed that test, we now, and by the way, the text was, after these things, God tested Abraham. Perhaps the test would have been with flying colors if he said, no, I'm not going to do it. But it gets even more exquisite. After these things, God tested Abraham, saying to him, Abraham, and of course, since Abraham anytime says, here I am. God said, take your son, your only one, the one you love, Isaac, and go forth to the land of Moriah. Offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains that I will show you. Now, there's a lot of unnecessary words there, isn't there? Kachna et bincha. Take your son. So the Midrash, remember Midrash it fills the spaces between the words. Kachna et bincha. So Abraham responds, not in the text, but in their imagination. I have two sons. Et yechidcha. Your only son. Each of them is the only son of their mother. Asher ahavta. The one you love. I love both of them. Enough of this. Yitzhak. I want that one. And now, here's where it gets even more ambiguous. And Lech Lecha, which is Abraham's journey, begins with that Hebrew phrase. And Lech Lecha, get out, go. To the land I will show you, Moriah, and V'hahalehu Sham. Now, this everybody has sacrifice him, right? Here's where translation gets really wonderful ambiguity. It can literally mean elevate him. It doesn't have to mean sacrifice. I mean, raise him up. On one of the mountains which I shall say to you. Okay. So he gets up early in the morning, et cetera, et cetera. And I want you, because of the nature of our attenuated time, look at verse 6. Abraham then took the wood for the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac his son in his own hand. He held the firestone and the knife, and the two of them went on together. One of the interesting things, they went on together. Isaac then said to Abraham his father, I'm going to read the Hebrew for you. Avi, Vayomer hineni v'ni, here I am, my son. Vayomer hinei ha'esh v'ha'itzim v'ayeh hasel olah. Behold, you got the fire, you got the wood, but where is the sheep for the offering? Vayomer Avraham Elohim yireh lo haseh la'olah b'ni. Now here I'm going to, and Abraham said, God will show us, him, the lamb for the offering, my son. Which is among the reasons, now it could be translated, comma, my son, or my son as the offering. Now for passion plays, this is often a shadowing of the Jesus story, of course, right? Including the wood to carry and all that sort of stuff. They came to the place, you know the altar, and an angel stops him just in time, right? Abraham, Alta Aslo Luma, don't do anything to that kid. Now, ladies and gentlemen, anybody serve in the military?
Close to it. 30-year my husband.
Okay.
So
What rank?
Why?
What rank did he reach? Colonel. Not bad.
If it's day.
Captain?
That's National Guard, so.
Okay.
You know.
Oh. Thank you, and thank you. But here's the interesting thing. As near as I can tell, by the way, it says a messenger of God told him, don't touch the kid, right? In most armies, when God gives an order, a private can't countermand it, right? It's one of the telltales that there's something funny going on here. Because in a midrash it says, where they put in God's mouth, where did he get the idea that I said to kill the kid? What is wrong with this man? And that's probably, again, why there's no record of God speaking to Abraham again after this episode. But most of us understand it, and we've been taught it in time immemorial, that this is the Bible's outlawing of human sacrifice, right? Weren't you taught that? Did you teach it? Yeah. Will it shock you that there's practically no evidence that in the ancient world that human sacrifice was a regular principle of any culture that was in the ancient world? It shouldn't shock us.
What about mine?
I was going to say.
For example, you're probably, I'm not sure about Mayan, I know about Aztec. I know more about Aztec. Okay. And the evidence that the Aztecs practiced human sacrifice is much later than the Hebrew Bible, much later. And in fact, before we get there, there are 3 episodes in the Hebrew Bible that allude to human sacrifice at all. Maybe I'll say 4. One is Jeremiah, who's concerned that people are causing their children la'avir ba'esh, to pass through the fire to Moloch. That doesn't mean to be sacrificed. It's like an initiation ceremony. I've seen these people walking on coals. At any rate. But it's often understood as sacrifice. But it doesn't say that at all. The other is Jephthah's daughter, where it says, he makes a vow that whatever comes out to meet me first, I'll offer to God. But it never says he sacrificed her. It says she wants a year to lament her virginity. It never says that she was sacrificed. The other is in Kings, where I think it's an Edomite king, is being besieged by the Israelite army, and he's so in extremis that he takes the crown prince on the wall of the city and sacrifices the crown prince, not a kid, crown prince, Prince Charles, for all I know, and now King Charles the third, and everyone is so shocked by this that they break off the battle because it's such a strange and weird thing. I'm going to give you one other example from the ancient world. Iphigenia at Aulis. Everybody know the reference? Agamemnon is leading the Greek fleet to conquer Troy. but the fleet is besieged because the gods can't decide what side they want to be on. And in the play Iphigenia at Aulis, Aulis, Agamemnon, who's informed by divination that the gods demand a human sacrifice, which clearly is not a normal thing, as opposed to the commonplace every day that we associate with the ancients, is his daughter. So he sends messengers back to Cassandra, who's going to end up killing him because he's done this when he comes back from Troy. Not Cassandra, Clytemnestra, right. Cassandra is a whole other matter. But Clytemnestra, thank you, that needs to send Iphigenia up with some supplies. So she comes, and he explains to her what he has to do. She explains to him that she doesn't want it done. However, she is so convinced by his arguments, in terms of the play I'm talking about now, that she agrees, and he is so convinced by her arguments that he doesn't want to do it, she has to persuade him to do it. And it works. But now, Aztecs. I know this is going to shock us. We know they took out the bleeding heart of the victim and held it up to the crowd. Did we all learn that in school? You know what the source of? There's no primary sources for that. The principal source is a document written by a Spanish monk that was sent back to raise money to convert these monstrous heathens 60 years after they'd already been conquered and decimated by disease. And, you know, we do this all the time about the other, right? We depersonalize, etc. What I don't know if they practice. I suspect that people kill captives. They kill captives, but as a regular routine, the gods demand blood. I doubt it very highly.
So
Very
you're
highly.
telling me that in the ancient world, my impression was, if God's asking him to kill his son as a human sacrifice, were there other people that were doing it? And so that's sometimes
The text. I can't go there because the text is silent on that. Yeah.
That's my interpretation.
Well,
I want to believe that.
Well, my interpretation is that this is a quintessential example of how the issue is not to get it right. The issue is to try to be a blessing. Because otherwise I have nothing in common with Abraham and I have nothing to learn from him. He screwed up royally. But he can still, as he learns at the end of this episode, be a blessing. Because guess what? I don't know about you, but I'm quite confident that there have been endless number of times when I failed to live up to the highest that is possible for me to reach. So what do? I could give up? I try again and try again. That's what I learned from Abraham in this extreme, and I do mean extreme, episode. Okay.
I have just one quick question.
I don't believe you. Go ahead.
It says, after he says, don't touch.
Don't touch him.
Yeah, he says, because since you have not withheld your son,
Mm-hmm.
your only son, from me. Now, I thought that there was Ishmael.
There's there's two only sons, which is, by the way, why in Arab tradition, not the Quran does not say who the child was. It shouldn't even say a child. There's even a tradition as an adult. But in Arab tradition, it's Ishmael, and that this takes place at the Kaaba in Mecca, as opposed to, oh boy, is that an interesting point, as opposed to where's this supposed to be in Jewish tradition? The Temple Mount, right? But it couldn't possibly be the Temple Mount because it says a 3-day journey into the wilderness, and we already know that Jerusalem is a settled place because we ran into Melchizedek, the king of Shalem, the king priest of Shalem, Salem, ta-da, Halloween, Jerusalem. So, do anybody know the name Mircea Eliade besides Mike and me? One of the great typologists of the religious imagination. And he says people construct sanctuaries at the place in which deity revealed itself. I tried to be neutral there, right? But the curious thing is that this is clearly not that place unless the point is that we have a responsibility to, if you will, bring God into the world. And any place we do that is a sanctuary.
What was the name of the person you said?
Eliade. Eliade. Mirceau, I think, is the first name. He was at the University of Chicago for many, many years. What's The Sacred and the Profane? Is that his most? I think his most well-known book is called The Sacred and the Profane. But he was Romanian, so he writes English in a very heavy-handed. What?
That sounds like a movie.
Well, The Sacred and the Profane? I don't know what it'll be rated, but I'm not confident you could go see it. No, there's definitely not a movie made of it. Okay. Oh, goodness gracious. Okay, chapter 24. Abraham was old, well advanced in years, and the Eternal had blessed Abraham in every way. By the way, there's a wonderful tradition. How could Abraham be blessed in every way? The Hebrew is Bakol. It had to mean he had a daughter, and his name was Bakol. Abraham now said to his slave, the elder of his household, who had oversight of all that was his, put your hand under my thigh so that I may have you swear by the eternal God of heaven and God that you will not take a wife for my son from among the daughters of the Canaanites in whose midst I dwell. Rather, you got to go back to the old place and get a kid. Get a wife for my son, right? Now, put your hand under my thigh is a euphemism for putting your hand on my male member, which gives us, by the way, I bet this is going to shock a few of us here, the word testimony comes from the word testes. I'm putting at risk my manhood. Okay, so he goes back.
And that's your testimony.
Verse 10. The slave then took 10 of his master's camels and laden with an abundant store his master got up and went to Abraham, Aram Naharaim, to the city of Nahor, which is where Abraham started his journey. Haran. Now, one of the things that's absolutely stunning about this is the telltale that's in this text. 10 camels. It's impossible for this story to be historically precise because camels hadn't been domesticated yet. If Abraham is 4,000 years ago, camels are only 3,000 years ago, more or less. So, clearly a narrative is constructed from a tradition that may have been orally transmitted, but nuances, what can you do with the creative impulse of writers? So, 10 camels, and here we have the first prayer in the Hebrew Bible. And he prayed, Eternal One, God of my master Abraham, please bring me luck, actually good fortune today, and do a kindness for my master Abraham. Here I am standing at the water font, and the daughters of the townspeople are going forth to draw water. The girl to whom I say, dip your pitcher and let me drink, and who replies, drink and let me water your camels too, let her be the one you have designated for your servant Isaac. That is how I shall know that you have done a kindness for my master. Before he was done praying, Rebekah, who had been born and so on and so forth, and you know that she says, take drink and I'll also water your camels. Now, if only prayer could be answered so quickly in all our lives, I would have made a fortune in the religion game. But what's absolutely stunning about this is, I think, the lesson that it unravels for us. There's no faucet for her to turn on. There's no well for her to drink a bucket. Anybody, any of you been to Israel? Megiddo? Yeah? So did you see the water course at Megiddo? Where is it? Underground. It's 140, depending on the water level, it's approximately 144 steps down and 144 steps up, because if you go down, you got to go up with water. Why is it hidden there? Because if a town has any possibility of withstanding a siege, it's got to hide and secure its water source. So in the ancient world, you rarely got a well on the surface. You dug down and made it protected and hidden. So this is a woman who's doing one heck of a job, because as I've done the research, a camel can go approximately 2 weeks without drinking. An adult camel, after 2 weeks without drinking, will drink 20 to 24 gallons of water. That means 10 camels times 20 to 24, it's approximately a ton of water. Down 144 steps, up 144, down, up, down, up. Now, what does that reveal about her character? That she does more than is required. Remember what I said about Abraham doing more than is required? Not only does it say more than is required, she's the perfect match for Isaac, who is, in the text, going to be more acted upon than acting over and over again. In fact, if you want a wonderful book, I highly recommend it, even though it was written in the 1950s, so it's still got some sexist language, is Certain People of the Book by Maurice, M-A-U-R-I-C-E, Samuel. Certain People of the Book. It's about the so-called minor characters in the Hebrew Bible. For instance, there's a chapter on Shiphrah and Puah, the Egyptian, what's the word I want? Egyptian, then what is it? People who give birth, who help give birth. Midwives, thank you very much. Whew. Don't tell anybody I couldn't think of that word. And with the chapter on Rebecca, he calls the manager, which is what she is going to be. But I regularly, whenever I'm doing a job interview, in the days when I would hire people, tell me a time when you did more than was required. Because that's an incredible window into this woman and into character in general. So, she does more than is required. We've done the, okay, do you go to chapter 48 of Genesis?
But how does she do that?
What?
How does she do that with regret?
Well, what she does is she takes an amphora of some kind.
Why do I have to make my bed? Why do I have to do this? Why do I have to go up those steps? Is that the attitude? Or is she a wonderful woman because she says, I will do this, I will do that?
Well, as near as I can tell, she's really quite remarkable, and she's always the action initiator, as we'll see. In fact, you know what? We shouldn't skip it. We're going to go to the birthright deception story. Go to chapter 27 of Genesis. I actually asked this, didn't I ask us to go there, right? Verse 1. Chapter 27, verse 1. When Isaac had grown old and his eyesight had dimmed, he called his elder son Esau, saying to him, My son, here I am. He answered, Look now, said he, I have grown old, and for all I know I may die any day. So pick up your weapons, your quiver and your bow, and go out to the countryside and hunt me some game. Then you can make me a tasty dish as I like and bring them to me, and I will eat so that I can give you my heartfelt blessing before I die. Which is to say, what your inheritance is going to be. There's a wonderful confusion in the text between the promise, which is the story of Abraham continuing, which is going to go through the cheating son, Jacob, versus the blessing of inheritance, which both of them get, which is what this is about right now. So, notice Isaac is not senile. He just has poor vision. He's very articulate, and he recognizes his son as soon as his son opens his mouth. As Isaac was speaking to his son, Esau, Rebekah was listening, and when Esau went to the countryside to hunt for some game, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, Look, I heard your father speaking to your brother Esau, saying, Bring me a game, blah, 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 and then bless you before the Eternal, before my death. Now, son, listen to me, to what I am instructing you. Go to the flock and bring me 2 tender kids. I will make them into tender dishes for the father, such as he likes. You will bring them to the father, and he will eat, so that he may bless you before his death. But Jacob said to his mother, Rebekah, look, my brother Esau is a hairy man, and I am a smooth-skinned man. Should my father have me away, I would seem to him like a cheat, and I will bring a curse to myself, not a blessing. His mother then said to him, Any curse that you will get will be on me, my son. Just listen to me and go and get them for me. Now, notice he's not worried about the cheating of his father, just worried about the possibility of a curse at being caught as well. And even better, his mama says, Don't worry about it, kiddo. It'll be on me. And he buys that too. You know, these are remarkable narratives in terms of their nuance, for sure. Now, Rebekah now took the finest of her elder son Esau's garments to the head of the house and dressed up her youngest son Jacob. The skins of the kids she wrapped on his hands and over the smooth part of his neck, and she put the tasty food and the bread that she had made into her son Jacob's hand. Now, there's a wonderful suggestion in Maurice Samuel's book that the single greatest miracles in the Hebrew Bible are about to occur. Making goat taste like venison is a substantial miracle. But even better, can you imagine how hairy Esau must have been that this is a conspiracy, give away a lot. This is a conspiracy of the 3 of them against one of them. Isaac knows that even though Esau is his more favored son, because he's the man of action, the man he wishes he could be, that the story of this people is going to go through the less favored son, but he needs plausible deniability in order to allow it to happen. We're going to see more of that in a second. Going then to his father, he said, "Father," and he replied, "Here I am. Which son of mine are you?" A moment ago, he didn't have that problem. Jacob said to his father, "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Pray get up and sit and eat of my game, so that you can give me your heartfelt blessing." Isaac then said to his son, "How is it that you were able to find game so quickly, my son?" And he replied, "The eternal your God made it happen to me." By the way, in the Midrash, this sentence, this response, is a giveaway that he knows it's not Esau, because Esau would never use such language about God. He's much too busy hunting and playing games. "Pray come near me," said Isaac to Jacob, "so that I can feel you, son. Are you really my son Esau, or are you not?" Either unbelievable suspicion or unbelievable need to try to demonstrate later that it wasn't my fault. Jacob approached his father Esau, felt him, and said, "The voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau." He did not recognize him, however, because his hands were hairy, blah, 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 blah. "Are you really my son?" Still, I answered, "Bring it near me and I will eat it." And he gives him a blessing. By the way, the blessing that Isaac gets and the blessing that Esau gets are almost exactly the same. Almost exactly the same. We don't have time to go into the nuanced details of it, but they truly are very close. But here's what I think is remarkable. Start with verse 33. Actually, 32. "But his father Isaac said," and this is Esau with whom he's speaking, "Who are you?" So he replied, "I am your son, your firstborn Esau." Isaac now began to shudder, a shuddering exceedingly great. He said, "Who then hunted game and brought it to me? And I've ate of it all before you came. I blessed him, and blessed he will remain." Who says blessed and blessed you he has to remain? Who made up that rule? You follow me? He is saying something that has no legitimate validity one way or the other in order to move the story forward in the way it has to, as opposed to the way he might want to. When Esau heard of his father's words, he broke into exceeding loud and bitter howl and said to his father, "Bless me too, father." I love that. Bless me. But he said, "Your brother came with deceit and took away your blessing." Go to verse 38, because this is, to my mind, one of the most important verses in the entire Bible. "Do you have but one blessing, father?" said Esau to his father. "Bless me too, father." And he does. So now, we did good old his dream. We're going to go to chapter 48. Verse 1. Remember the phrase we did with the binding of Isaac after these things? There it is again. It's the same Hebrew, by the way. Very suspicious, very troublesome, very important. "It was after these things they said to Joseph, 'Look, your father is ill.'" What do you got? Fading? Weaker? So, why does he have to be told? Well, okay, but doesn't he visit his father? Wouldn't he know? So this is a wonderful opportunity for the expansive notion of rabbinic tradition. Why wouldn't he go? Because that he has to be told that his father is ill suggests that if he visits at all, it ain't necessarily so that he does with any regularity or frequency. And if you know, the linchpin between the first of the commandments and the last of the commandments is honor your father and your mother, so that your days will be long upon the land, right? Ain't honoring him if you don't visit him. Why wouldn't he go? Give me an imagination of why he wouldn't go.
Doesn't want to be chastised.
Why would he be chastised?
Not living up to Dad's expectations.
He's prime minister of Egypt. You couldn't be Pharaoh.
He doesn't want to
Or-
see that his father has gotten old.
Oh, that's nice. The plausible deniability that I can't accept the notion of my daddy's old, but daddy was old when he finally got reunited with him. Yeah, that's another. What are any other possibilities that come to mind? So here's what I would call a what?
Some kind of estrangement.
Oh, that's a very interesting possibility. Some kind of estrangement that they never fully reconciled. Because let me put it this way: anybody here serve the role of teacher's pet? And the other students resented you, right? And sometimes we end up resenting the teacher for putting us in that position. Now, Jacob is a pretty miserable father also. Gives his kid, by the way, the coat of many colors, which we have no idea what that Hebrew phrase means, probably a long sleeve coat. Ketonet pasim does not mean many colors. It means a coat with long sleeves, most likely. Which is to say, he put him in a dress. Which is to say, his preferred wife has died, Rachel is gone, and Joseph is the oldest son, the older son, and a Rachel substitute. And maybe there's some resentment. Maybe that's an option. We don't know. It's just our entanglement with the text in terms of what we bring to it. Here's another possibility. One of the things that's clear in the tradition is that the text does not make it clear if Jacob ever found out how all of this happened. I'm going to give you a very specific, for instance. When Joseph is a slave in Egypt, when Joseph is in the prison in Egypt, there's no way he can get message to daddy, who's got to know that daddy is in despair because his favorite son of his favorite wife is dead. At least he thinks he is. By the way, in subtlety, the other boys don't say he's dead. They say, see this coat. See if you recognize it. And he draws the conclusion, right? Artistic qualities beyond compare. So, why doesn't now he's vizier over all of Egypt? Why doesn't he send a message, dear Dad, everything's okay, send money? Well, no, that's the old Jewish joke. Yeah. Why doesn't he send a message? I'm okay, Dad. Why doesn't he? Or for that matter, why this whole elaborate game with his brothers? Have you ever thought about why to do that? Maybe it's a little revenge, but maybe there's also something else going on. What would happen if Joseph sends a message to Jacob, I'm alive and well? What would happen?
You want him to come home.
Well, that's nice.
Jacob might go get him.
Trouble? What would be the trouble?
Oh, he's got those other sons that must be guilty of something.
I think you've hit a nail that I want hit on the head. Namely, he gets one son back, and the cost is 10 sons. You did this to your father? Forget about it, you did it to him. You did this to me, this enormous heart pain for which there is no healing? You did this to me? He gets one son back and loses 10. The restraint of Joseph is admirable and noteworthy.
That he didn't kill him.
We'll get there. He recognizes that the boys when they come down, and he sets up this whole elaborate game, which in terms of the narrative art, we're not always certain if he's inventing it as he goes along or if it's simply just a test. But here's what happens. One of the rules of rabbinic tradition, you need to understand that these characters have not read the Bible. They're in it. And so there's even a phrase that had Reuben known that this story would end up in the Hebrew Bible, he would have behaved differently. Which, I mean, they loved playing with the text, and I don't mean that in any negative fashion at all. So, they come back the second time, right? Benjamin is with them, and all of a sudden, they go back, and they find that Joseph has planted in Benjamin's saddlebags his divining cup and money, right? His guards go after them, and they all say, we didn't do it. And in fact, if it's found in any one of us, he will be your slave forever. And lo and behold, in turn, and they get to Benjamin, and they all go back to Egypt. They don't have to go back. They all go back to Egypt. And in the most important speech in Genesis, Judah says, take me instead. He's not guilty, but take me instead of my youngest brother. And that's when Joseph can no longer restrain himself. He breaks down in tears and says, to quote Pope John Paul II, I am Joseph, your brother. They're stunned. And there's reconciliation. Right? So one of the definitions in Jewish tradition of how do you know when you've done true repentance is when you're confronted with similar circumstances and you don't behave the same way. They had every good reason to, once they had, only because they didn't like him, and they got rid of him. Now they have every good reason to get rid of him, and they won't do it. Those are transformed, they are now brothers, as opposed to whatever else they might have been previously. But it gets more challenging. Go to chapter 50, verse 14. This is after they've buried Jacob. Joseph then returned to Egypt, he and his brothers, and all had gone with him to bury his father. After burying his father, Joseph's brothers, seeing that their father was dead, now said, perhaps Joseph still bears us enmity and intends to repay us for all the harm that we afflicted upon him. So they brought a charge to Joseph, that is, they sent someone, saying, thus shall you say to Joseph, please I beg, your father left this charge before his death, saying, thus shall you say to Joseph, please I beg of you, forgive the transgression of your brothers and their sins, though they inflicted harm upon you, yet now please forgive their transgression of the servants of your father's God. Joseph wept as they spoke to him. There's a lot going on in there. One, he weeps again, because men in the Hebrew Bible were not frightened of tears. Two, it seems utterly incredible that Jacob would have given such a message to the brothers when if he were going to give such a message, it's the message he should give to Joseph. Doesn't make any sense for him to give it. Let alone the brothers don't even have the decency to go themselves. They send a messenger. Which, among other things, clearly means that Joseph put that burden down a long time ago. They haven't. And boy, is that a story for all of us, isn't it? Those we may have offended have likely forgiven us long before we have forgiven ourselves. They may not forget it, but they have clearly forgiven us. It is an extraordinary, extraordinary moment. Because remember, we don't even know if Jacob ever found out what in the heck happened. Because the text is absolutely silent about it. 100% silent about it. So, I've got, 6 minutes? Is it? I got one more thing we could do, or anybody, questions, comments, alternative speeches, a piece of text that you want. Oh, what does a rabbi think of peculiar thing Z that I've always sort of imagined that I couldn't understand or wondered, and now finally someone's going to explain it to me. Please.
I'm guessing that the Midrash volumes are voluminous.
The Midrash volumes are voluminous.
If we wanted to read something,
Oh.
Do you have a suggestion as to where to start?
Ooh.
We had a lady that came to church quite a while ago, and she had actually written a midrash and put it out for acceptance. And from what I gather, it happened.
Well, I'm looking at, I'm hearing the notion of a collection that goes through the centuries.
What about Tales of the Hasidim?
Well, yeah, that's Elie Wiesel has written some good stuff. What's the one about something of God? Messengers of God, I think. Yeah, look at Messengers of God by Elie Wiesel. But that's only a small niche. I was trying to think if there's something. Yes. Voices of Wisdom by Francine Klagsbrun. Klagsbrun. But you'll forgive me. You're going to get a sampling, a taste.
No, I understand.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
when I envision it, there's a
And then you could also take a look at Jewish Wisdom by Rabbi Joseph Telushkin, Telushkin,
And some of these now
something like that.
you can do an online search.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
But boy, there's an online website called Sefaria, which is the Hebrew word for a library, and it has lots and lots and lots and lots and lots, too much. But if you want to know what the midrash on a particular verse is, it will actually do that.
Okay, and how do you spell that?
Sefaria, Sefaria. Yes, sir.
I have a question about the text. So the brother, from in verse 16
Of chapter.
of chapter 50.
16.
Yeah, that the brothers have made up this supposed message
Oh.
from the father. So
Yeah,
they still haven't learned about lying.
Yeah, well, this is the second episode, thank you in which, theoretically, for the sake of peace, it is permissible to lie. Because what does Joseph do? He cries. Oh, brothers, when will you know that I truly do believe that while none of us may have wished this to happen, God turned it. As near as I can tell, the world is divided into why me's and what can I do nowers. And there are people who get a metaphorical hangnail and their whole world falls apart. And there are people, we know them, who endure extraordinary challenge and difficulty, and still they think the journey is worth it. I'm not sure I understand how it happens that we fall into one category or the other, and I even believe that the what can I do nowers occasionally have a moment where, why me? But that's not the end of the story. It is, we got to do Jacob coming Israel. Chapter 32, verse 23. Oh, we did this.
Yeah,
We did the Peniel. Yeah, I'm sorry. We did this. But Ki'im beirachtani. I will not let you go until you bless me. I did not want this to happen, but now that it has, what is the blessing I may derive from it? What is the something that will continue to be a benediction for life, mine and others, this having happened? Yes, sir.
Why did
Because.
the characters or God or whoever want the lineage to go through Jacob instead of Esau?
Oh, goodness gracious. First of all, because the text says so. Second, and I really appreciate this question because I'm going to give you a wonderful and inadequate answer. Okay? I'm paraphrasing a wonderful colleague, may he rest in peace, named Rabbi Sam Karf. He said, God is confronted with imperfect instruments. What's God going to do? Choose as the instrument to carry on the story one who cares so much that he'll do almost anything to continue the legacy, the blessing, the promise to Abraham, or one who thinks so little of it that it'll bargain away for some chili. In short, by the way I embrace that in my own life is there are endless numbers of occasions when I don't know what to do. I don't know what the right course is. So my regular question, what is the way that will demonstrate that I cared too much rather than cared too little? Because while I can't make the outcome I might wish, at the least I can live with myself knowing I tried too much rather than too little. And I think that's the Jacob lesson. Yes, sir.
That also applies to the make you alive, I tell Joseph, right? That's the only way to make peace with him.
Interesting. I think he's already made peace, but they haven't. And but however,
So that's why they lie,
yeah,
they haven't
yeah.
made peace.
They're still afflicting themselves and assuming, at least the text suggests, assuming that it was only while Dad was alive that we had the option. In fact, that we get a ditto of that in Esau supposedly says, after Dad has died, then I'll get rid of this no good for nothing cheating brother of mine. Now, by the way, when they reconcile, it's exquisite. Esau embraces him, and they embrace each other, and they kiss. And they come together to bury their father.
He severed death of his brother-in-law.
Not, well,
Tried to kill him. And that's
but
why he
they
was himself
they
nice.
reconcile. That's the bottom line, and they come together to bury their father. Okay, folks, we're already 8:01. It's close. I really do appreciate the chance to be with you and your kindness and the opportunity for us to learn and grow. God bless. No charge for that.